Good news is we're all in this together, and when we see we're together, we can work things out. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. Tom is under the weather today and can't be in, and I know I miss him. I'm sure you will. The show is much more fun to do and undoubtedly more fun to watch when he's here. This week we've had a number of important developments, but before I get into that, I should explain to anybody who's new. This show is based on items that are put up at my blog. Every day I post 10 to 15 items on energy and climate change. These are things that I have found in the news. I do web searches. I look at conventional, ordinary news media, BBC, CNN. I get a lot of material from Clean Technica, which is devoted just to clean tech. And I do web searches using standard search engines. And I think I probably look through perhaps 25 to 30 items for every one I find of interest. The ones that I do find of interest, I put together a 50 or 55 word synopsis with a link to the original article and post 10 to 15 of these every day. If you hear an article described that you're interested in, you can go to the blog, geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com, and there's a calendar there. You can click on the day for the calendar. I will try to remember to update the materials that I talk about on the show so that you'll know what date the items come from. We're starting on Thursday, May 24th, which is a week ago today. I'm recording the show at the BCTV studio in Brattleboro, Vermont, on Thursday morning, May 30th. And the first item that I have is from the Providence Journal, which is in Providence, Rhode Island. And that item is about deepwater wind. The state of Rhode Island has selected Deepwater Wind, the Providence company, that built the nation's first offshore wind farm, to develop a 400 megawatt proposal in federal waters far off the coast that would be 10 times the size of the Block Island demonstration project at Block Island. Governor Gina Raimondo announced this development as a surprise on Thursday. It happens that the same day that happened, there was another announcement from Massachusetts, and this is reported by WCAI. I'm going to put up a photograph for you here. There we go. I'm having a little trouble. Tom usually puts up the photographs, and I sit back lazily reading the news items. This is from WCAI, which is I'm thinking it's a Massachusetts television station. I might be wrong. It might be from another state. Massachusetts made a big step forward in its push to rely on renewable power by agreeing to purchase 800 megawatts of offshore wind power from Vineyard Wind. The new Bedford-based company was one of three competing for the contract. The proposed farm is poised to become the largest offshore wind farm in the country. Well, of course it is. The Block Island wind farm is the only one we've got, and it's only got 5 turbines. The Block Island wind farm is, in fact, what you're looking at in the photograph. Its turbines are off Block Island, and they are supplying the electricity to Block Island, and they're also supplying electricity to the mainland. The electricity is more than double the price of standard mainland power, but it's only about 40% of the price of what Block Island residents had been paying for power. And part of the reason for the high cost of electricity on Block Island, it was because they had been reliant on diesel oil for power. And that diesel oil, of course, had to be brought in by barge or by boat. The Block Island wind farm would produce power at a much lower price, but it was necessary to build a submarine cable to the mainland. A submarine cable had always been too expensive for the people on Block Island to be able to afford. Now, with this wind farm, that is affordable. On the same day that these two developments took place, there was another item also having to do with wind power, which was in New Jersey, and I will get to that in a few minutes. But we're still on Thursday, on the Thursday blog posting, which was dealing with things here that had happened on Wednesday. The news for the New Jersey item appeared after my blog post, which is put together usually about 6 o'clock in the morning. And so it appeared on the next day. Our next item is from NECN. A Vermont food company whose products are on store shelves throughout New England is now making its coffee using emerging power source that's gentler on the environment. The coffee beans look the same, dark brown as always, but the energy that now operates at the Vermont Coffee Company in Middlebury is green. This is a reflection of a trend that's been going on through the power industry. Vermont Coffee Company is just one of many organizations that are switching to green power. The green power is now not very much more expensive than standard grid power coming from conventional systems, and we will see more evidence of that later on in this show. Anyway, we are up to Friday, May 25th, and we're back to wind turbines. Here is the item from New Jersey. Sorry about the delay here. From Wind Power Engineering, New Jersey Governor Phil Murray signed legislation that will move the state's electricity mix to 50% renewable by 2030 and codifies the largest state commitment to offshore wind power. State law now commits the state of New Jersey to develop 3,500 megawatts of offshore wind power, enough to power over 1 million average homes. Now, 3,500 megawatts is not 5 times as much as the 640 megawatt Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant. It's actually, I'm going to say, about half of that. Because the capacity factor of offshore wind power is only about half the capacity factor of nuclear power. The wind doesn't always blow. Well, the nuclear plant doesn't always run either, but it runs a higher percentage of the time, or at a higher capacity on average than wind turbines do. Nevertheless, 3,500 megawatts of offshore wind power is about 2.5 to 3 times as much as the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant used to be. And it's a fair amount of power. The state of New Jersey is having nuclear plants closed down. The Oyster Creek plant is going to start laying people off, in fact, next month. And so they have to be prepared in New Jersey for a change in the power sources that they've got, because they're not building new nuclear power plants. And neither, for that matter, is practically anybody else in the United States. There's one pair of reactors that are going in Georgia, as I recall, and there are a couple of others that people are talking about putting in, but there's not a lot of action on nuclear power. That item, by the way, is from Wind Power Engineering. The next item that we have is from Energy Storage News. ESS Inc., ESS Incorporated, U.S. maker of the only flow battery with a chemistry based on iron and saltwater electrolytes, is making its first move into the Brazilian energy market. A 50 kilowatt, 400 kilowatt hour test unit will be deployed and integrated together with 100 kilowatts of photovoltaics, allowing for several hours of energy storage of on-site generated electricity. For anybody who doesn't understand how a flow battery works, basically what you have is, instead of lead, for example, in a lead sulfate electrolyte, as you would have in a car battery, you have two electrolytes which are separated usually by a membrane. It's not always necessary to have a membrane if the electrolytes are not miscible, so they can't mix with each other. But in this particular flow battery, there would be a membrane, and what happens is the electrolyte flows usually in one direction on one side of the membrane, and the opposite direction on the other side of the membrane, and it just goes around, exposing the membrane on both sides to fresh electrolyte, which gradually mixes and gives off its power. Now, the amount of power that you get out of the battery depends on the size of the membrane and, of course, the electrolytes. The amount of energy that you get depends on the amount of electrolyte you've got in total. So if you have a little bitty membrane, it's not going to give you a lot of electricity at any given time. Even if you have a huge amount of electrolyte, if you have a small amount of electrolyte and a huge battery membrane, you're going to be able to use that electrolyte up very quickly. So what we're looking at here is the difference between watts and watt hours. A kilowatt hour is 1,000 watt hours. So it's a kilowatt for an hour, or it's 2 kilowatts for half an hour, or 5 kilowatts for 12 minutes, as opposed to the watts, which is the actual power that's there, the capacity of the power. And I've got a thing going on here in the background of the picture. There we go. Is that better? Anyway, these flow batteries have a number of advantages. One of the disadvantages has been that the traditional flow battery has been based on based on a rare vanadium. It's vanadium, which is not inexpensive. Vanadium is expensive, and but there are other chemistries, and one of these is this iron saltwater chemistry that is being used by ESS. Anyway, I should go on. Our next item is from ABC Online, again on Friday, May 25th. South Australia will push ahead with its plan to install Tesla battery systems in 50,000 homes. The new state government is committed to the pro-battery agenda of its predecessor. The deal to create what is being called the world's largest virtual power plant appears to have survived political changes from the Labour Party to the Liberal Party dominating. The Australian Liberal Party is kind of like a conservative party in the United States. Labour is more liberal by American standards. Under the Labour Party, Tesla put in a 100 megawatt battery that cost the state $50 million. And in the first 4 months, we dealt with this last week, but I'll remind you, in the first 4 months of use, that battery saved the state $35 million. So the payoff time for the battery is about 6 months. And that is so impressive. The price of electricity is being decreased because of it. We can be sure a deal that was made between Tesla and the previous government, which was that they would put solar panels and batteries on 50,000 homes of people with below average income. That deal was thought to be possibly one that would be canceled by the new government. The new government had its own ideas about putting in 40,000 battery systems without solar panels, as I recall. What the new government is doing now is they're saying that they will honor both of those two agreements. And that is going to put a lot of batteries into South Australia, which in turn will change the nature of the whole power grid there. South Australia is a big state in terms of territory. It's a multiple of the size of Texas. But at the same time, it is fairly sparsely populated. My recollection is that the city of Melbourne is there, but I think that's the only big city. That metropolitan area around Melbourne is the only big urbanized area in the state. There are smaller ones. ABC Online is the source of that, by the way. ABC Online is Australian broadcasting company. We are up to Saturday, May 26th, and I've got a picture here of a solar array, which I will put up on the TV. The item here is PV Magazine International. And by the way, the photographs that I put up, for the most part, come from the articles themselves. Some of them come occasionally from Wikimedia Commons. GTM Research projects 24 cent per watt solar panels and utility scale fixed tilt systems costing 70 cents per watt by 2022 in the United States. This would open up new possibilities for ultra cheap power. The cost of electricity from such systems could fall to 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour or lower. Donald Trump's solar panel tariffs may delay that goal, but not by much. The tariffs are set to phase out by 2022, which is the date that GTM Research said we would reach those prices. And the observation that I would make about that is that the cost of wind power is already declined to very often below 2 cents per kilowatt hour. The cost of solar has declined to 2 cents or so per kilowatt hour. The cost of batteries, as we have seen from this thing in South Australia, has declined to the point where it's cheaper to back up coal burning and natural gas burning power plants and nuclear power plants with batteries than it is with natural gas. So basically we're at a point here where it's just plain cheaper to go to renewable power with battery backup, as we will see in the next item. By the way, I am still here on Saturday, May 26th, which we started the PV Magazine article with. The next item here is about exactly what I was just talking about. It came from Reuters. Two utilities, Vistra Energy Corporation and Dominion Energy, which serve a total of about 5.5 million electricity customers in more than a dozen U.S. states, they both say this, they are done building combined cycle natural gas fired power plants. Instead, they will put in large solar systems which offer them plentiful and inexpensive electricity. Again, we're at a point here where the cost of renewable energy is fallen significantly below the cost of energy from fossil fuels. And so we're probably going to be seeing more and more of this developing in the next year or two. The effect of this on the market we will see in the next item. But basically what's happening is these two utilities are saying that they're no longer interested in building natural gas plants. Now, the use of natural gas last year in the United States fell 8.5% from what it had been the year before. So this is an industry which is in a bit of a decline. The production of natural gas actually went up, but the difference is that natural gas is being exported as a liquefied natural gas. However, what's happening is this year we will see a large number of natural gas burning power plants come online in the United States because they were ordered 4 years ago when natural gas was at a very low price and the price of wind power and solar power had not yet declined. Those plants are coming online in a situation where the amount of electricity that Americans are using is declining. Part of that is because people and businesses are going off. They're more reliant on on-site production of their own power, whether they're going off-grid or just using their own power. Big companies like Amazon, General Motors, Apple, we've heard about all these companies putting solar panels up on their rooftops, and what's happening is the amount of electricity that people want is declining. But natural gas is hitting more and more competition from renewable energy resources, which are being put on very rapidly. So my guess is those plants that are being put online are probably not going to last very long. And in fact, we've seen this kind of thing happening elsewhere already. There was Tom and I talked about a power plant that was built in Belgium a couple of years ago, and it was closed. It was a coal-burning power plant. It was closed after only 18 months of operations. This is an expensive closure of a plant because that plant is not going to be written down other than just as a write-down. They're not going to be able to make money on that plant. So that leads us into the next item, which is from General Electric. Well, I'm sorry, it's from Utility Dive. And what we have here, by the way, is a Jenbacher J920 Flextric generating set. The Jenbacher was a company that was operated in Austria, and they made these things. That engine that you see there is basically a modified design from a locomotive engine. It's basically what they put in a diesel locomotive. The engine has been altered so that in this particular case it burns natural gas. It is a diesel engine that burns natural gas. And sorry about that. I'm trying to do my own engineering, and you know, Tom, when he's sitting here, looks like a deer in the headlights because he's staring at the monitors, trying to keep straight what pictures are supposed to be up. Everything looks bright for me when I'm talking, but today I'm trying to do everybody's work all at once, and it's kind of like walking and chewing gum at the same time. It's a little bit beyond my means. Anyway, that is a Jenbacher engine, and it having a little trouble with the computer here too. There we go. That burns natural gas. It has something that looks like a spark plug in each cylinder because it needs to have a little heat for the natural gas to ignite. And by the way, these things, if they're working in a cogeneration facility, you can get very close to a little bit less than 50% efficiency out of the engine, and then about almost 50% out of the efficiency out of the cogeneration unit. So you can actually run these things at about 90% efficiency. And in places like Güssing in Austria, the Jenbacher engines are being driven on biogas, which comes from biodigesters that are using farm waste. Anyway, General Electric's shares plunged 7% on the 23rd of May. It was the worst one-day decline since an 8.4% slide in April of 2009. The economic health of General Electric and other large power equipment makers may hinge on how utilities handle the expected wave of power plant retirements. Mitsubishi said it expects orders for steam and gas turbines to dry up by 2020. Mitsubishi is saying they don't expect to be able to sell gas turbines as soon as 2020, and this is putting a lot of pressure on Mitsubishi and Siemens and General Electric and anybody else who wants to build steam or gas-powered turbines, or in this case, this reciprocating engine that operates on gas. And the reason is because of the items that we just heard from Reuters, saying that the utilities were not going to be building natural gas powered power plants. When the coal burning power plants that they have retire, or gas powered plants retire, they're going to be replacing them with solar, and obviously with battery backup, and quite possibly with wind power. Things are changing for the internal, for the fossil fuels industry, and by the way, that means they're going to be changing elsewhere. We have a Congress in the United States that was elected based on a huge amount of money that was put into the election from the fossil fuels industry. And at some point in the not very distant future, that money is not going to be available because the fossil fuels industry is going to be hitting harder times. That's my prediction. So we will see how things develop in that regard. Anyway, we are up to Sunday, May 27th, and we have another picture, and I can see that this computer is going to misbehave because that's what it likes to do. There we go. This particular picture obviously is a biological study that was done under a microscope or such thing. No, I'm sorry, artwork. Artwork. And this is from the New York Times, including the artwork. It was an article called "The Silence of the Bugs." 56 years after Rachel Karchen's Silent Spring warned of bird die-offs from pesticides, a now new biocrisis may be emerging. A study published last fall showing a 76% decline in the total seasonal biomass of flying insects netted at 63 locations in Germany over the last 3 decades only tells part of the story. This story includes a lot of information about other species, not just insects. And we've talked about this on Energy Week from time to time, actually fairly often. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds found that they had seen a 70% decline in seabird populations over a 60-year period. The World Wildlife Fund had seen a 60% decline in wildlife over a 40-year period. I called them to find out and talked to one of their scientists to find out what they meant by wildlife, and he said this is the population of all vertebrate species, which means that if you could somehow count every vertebrate animal in the world, that's what the population would be. And the decline in the population of insects, all of this is related to a set of chemicals that are being released into the environment. Some of them are insecticides. Some of them, which by the way are poisonous, not just to insects, but to other animals as well. I should make an observation here about DDT. DDT used to be used very, very widely. I can remember trucks driving down a street in a residential neighborhood outside Chicago, spraying the neighborhood with DDT. in order to kill insects because of an outbreak of polio in the city. And it turned out years later, when they understood what they were doing, that the DDT wasn't going to have any effect on polio because polio wasn't spread by insects. Nevertheless, they sprayed for the insects, and in fact, I remember when I was in grade school, teachers saying that people had been putting just oil, onto swamps to prevent mosquito larvae from living. Well, it prevented a lot of other things from living too. Anyhow, what's happening now is more like the insect populations, the wildlife populations, the bird populations are being affected by a number of chemicals that are being made or are byproducts of fossil fuels. Some of these are in fact herbicides or other poisons that are made specifically because they're poisonous. Roundup from Monsanto is an example of a system that involves an herbicide. DDT was used on insects because it had been found that it had no effect on animals that stored energy in fat, which insects don't do. And what they had failed to do when they did the tests was really look closely into the DDT situation, because what happens is the DDT is fat soluble, so it gets stored in people's fat. If the people suddenly lose a lot of weight, that DDT is released into their system, and it produces its havoc on their nerves, the havoc that would have been produced or was intended to be produced on insects. Anyway, most of this damage is in one way or another connected with the use of fossil fuels. I should move on to the next item here. This is from that one was from the New York Times. This one, still Sunday, May 27th, is from Voice of America. Saudi Arabia and Russia are discussing raising OPEC and non-OPEC oil production by about 1 million barrels per day, sources said, weeks after U.S. President Donald Trump complained about artificially high prices. Raising production would ease 17 months of strict supply curbs as oil hits its highest price since late 2014 at $80.50 a barrel. Now, Donald Trump may want to have the price of oil reduced at the gas pump in the United States. Playing games with prices is not really going to be entirely helpful in the United States, though, because if the price goes down, American oil companies will not be able to make the money that they will make if it stays up. This is a tricky situation that is not necessarily good for people. I'm going to move on from there. The next item, still on Sunday, May 27th, is from the Western Journal. The U.S. is leading a drive to promote nuclear power worldwide, showcasing the Trump administration's understanding of nuclear technology as a crucial source of zero-carbon electricity. Deputy Energy Secretary Dan Brilette launched an initiative that aims to, quote, highlight the value of nuclear energy as a clean, reliable energy resource, end quote. I just don't know what to make of this. The problem with nuclear energy is, yes, it produces no carbon at the nuclear power plant. That doesn't mean that it's zero carbon, because the nuclear fuel has to be mined. We have to deal with mine tailings. The fuel has to be refined. It has to be enriched. It has to be transported. All of these steps require a certain amount of fossil fuels be used, or at least given the equipment that we've got installed, but very much to the point, I'm not sure that nuclear power is even viable under any circumstances, given its price and the price of solar and renewable and wind power and batteries. There are talks going on right now in the UK. Hitachi is interested in building a nuclear power plant in the UK, but they want reassurances that they're going to be able to build the plant and make money on it, obviously. But in order to make money, they want to be guaranteed an income from the power that's produced that is roughly double the wholesale power of electricity in the UK. So this is a serious problem with nuclear power. And there's another thing too. Nuclear power proponents always talk about how safe nuclear power is. And the fact is, we've had a little over 500 nuclear power plants come online to produce electricity for power grids in all history, and 11 of them have melted down. I can name them if anybody wants to know, but certainly we had 3 Mile Island, Fermi, and the sodium experimental reactor just outside of Los Angeles, which was putting power online. All 3 of those melted down in the United States. There were 2 meltdowns in France at Saint-Laurent on different occasions. One in Czechoslovakia, one in Scotland. Obviously, there was Chernobyl. 3 in Japan at Fukushima Daiichi. We really don't know how many nuclear power plants may have melted down, because there may have been meltdowns in Russia that we were never told about that didn't have large amounts of radiation released. But this is not what I would call safe. The likelihood of a meltdown is about 1 in 40 or 1 in 50 when a nuclear power plant is built. And historically that's been the case. And in every single case, it could be argued that the reason why there was a meltdown was because of human error. For example, at Fukushima Daiichi, the whole thing was triggered by an earthquake and tsunami. The tsunami was 14.5 meters. How could you possibly predict a 14.5 meter tsunami? They had a 5.5 meter seawall that should have been enough for a tsunami. Well, the fact of the matter is, there had been the highest wave in that tsunami was 37 meters. There had been a tsunami of 27 meters on the northeast coast of Japan in 1933, as I recall, and there was another one in 1896, which was also 37 meters. But they had a 5.5 meter seawall. Clearly, somebody did something wrong. And I would call that human error. Whether it was because of a mistake or because of corruption, I don't know. Certainly, they would not have wanted to have to build a seawall of 37 meters, because to do so would have made it impossible to make money with the power plant. We are still on Sunday, May 27th, and I should move on. The next item is from we're up to Monday, May 28th, and we have an item from the San Francisco Chronicle, and there is a picture for this. Community choice aggregation has been spreading across California. It now serves 12% of the state's electricity demand and is growing fast. Local governments have embraced it as a way to exert more control over their electricity supply and set their own rates while increasing their use of renewable energy. But some worry about possible difficulties. Yes, there are possible difficulties. There are economic difficulties, there are grid difficulties. This is just a matter of balancing out supply, demand, and making sure that people are fairly compensated for the work they do. These are things that are developing. The system has to develop. Okay, still, that picture, by the way, is wildflowers growing by solar panels, and it came with the article. I don't know why, but there it is. Pretty picture, pretty flowers. The next item is from the New York Daily News. Senior EPA officials have been working closely with conservative group that dismisses climate change to rally like-minded people for public hearings on science and global warming. They recently released emails show that they recruited help to counter negative news coverage and tout Administrator Scott Pruitt's agency stewardship. In other words, they don't want you to know the truth. They want you to know what they want you to know. And they will hire actors to make sure that I shouldn't say that. There have been organizations that have hired actors to make sure that public meetings have a predominance of people supporting the side that hired the actors. This apparently happened at in a case in New Orleans. But here the EPA is, we don't know that they're hiring actors, but they are rallying people. The EPA is rallying people to attend its own meetings in order to provide public support for the side that it wants, which I think is a little bit on the, well, it tends to the reprehensible. Okay, the next item comes from Renews. Vattenfall has completed turbine installation at the 93.2 megawatt Aberdeen Bay wind farm off Scotland. Swire Blue Ocean Jackup Pacific Orca tackled the work from the Danish port of Esbjerg. The wind farm features 11 turbines made by MHI Vestas. 9 of these have capacities of 8.4 megawatts each, and 2 of 8.8 megawatts. Now, this is interesting for a couple of different reasons. One of them is that these turbines of 8.8 megawatts are among the largest turbines in the world in terms of their capacity. But there is more to be said about this, and the more is partly that these turbines off Aberdeen are the ones that Donald Trump was opposing. He didn't want them put in and was very interested in making sure that he could stop them. In fact, he went to Scotland a couple of years ago to testify before a hearing, and the people at the hearing basically ignored what he said because they said that there was no credible evidence offered against the wind turbines. Okay, we are up to Tuesday, May 29th. From Brand eBiz, China accounts for more than 2/5 of all renewable energy jobs, with the country's share particularly high in solar heating and cooling. 83% of all people worldwide are in that industry are in China. And in the solar photovoltaic sector, 66% in that sector are in China, though less in wind power, according to the Renewable Energy and Jobs Report from the International Renewable Energy Agency. That, I should say, is hardly a surprise. Those are jobs, by the way, many of them that could be in the United States, but we don't seem to be interested in pursuing renewable energy industries the way we are pursuing other industries such as nuclear power and coal and natural gas, at least in terms of the support the U.S. government gives to it. Our next item is from phys.org, and that has this picture. Scientists at the School of Ocean Sciences at Bangor University in Wales. Bangor is an interesting name. It means large college. A review published of tidal range energy resource and optimization in a peer-reviewed journal, Renewable Energy. They say 1/3 of all global electricity needs could be provided by the world's tidal range. That is about 7,000 I'm sorry, 5,792 terawatt hours from tidal wave power plants. And by the way, one of the reasons I chose to put that wave picture up is because it was with the article. It's a nice looking picture, but it has nothing to do with tidal range energy, because that isn't based on waves. It's based on the tides themselves, which rise and fall. And some of the articles that came out on this day about this talked about tidal waves producing energy. You've got to be careful about what people say in the, you know, there's an old saying, those who can do, those who can't teach. I don't know how true that is, but I occasionally say it and add to it. And those who can't teach become journalists, which, by the way, I am, just so fair disclosure here. Okay, the next item that we have is from PV Magazine International. HDF Energy launched one of the world's largest solar plus storage power plants in French Guiana. Now, of course, this would have to go into French Guiana. Where else would you put such a thing? Well, certainly not the United States. The $90 million plant is expected to generate about 50 gigawatt hours of electricity per year. The facility will produce 10 megawatts until evening and 3 megawatts during the night. Hydrogen will be used for long-term storage with batteries for short-term. This is an interesting combination because it means that you have a solar plus battery system which is intended to produce hydrogen for an alternate use. When you get into a nighttime situation, the batteries are going to produce power, and if the batteries can't produce power, then in one way or another we're going to get the power from the hydrogen. There are multiple ways of getting power from hydrogen, one of which is to burn it in an internal combustion engine, which could be reciprocating or it could be a turbine. Another way to get power from hydrogen is to use a fuel cell plant for that purpose. But the point is that they're doing this so that they have multiple backups of different types. And it means that if you have solar power and the battery's full, you don't have to waste that energy. You just make more hydrogen. And so this, I think, may be an interesting development that can be used elsewhere. Okay, we are up to Wednesday, May 30th, and we have a photograph here from the Cape Cod. This is from a publication called Cape Cod Today. And I very much liked, I've lost my mouse cursor here. Ah, here we go. I very much liked this photograph. There was a picture of the Cape Light Compact's logo with the article, and it's such a pretty logo that I was tempted to put it up, but I decided that I'd go to Wikimedia Commons and get this picture of a sailboat sailing past a Cape Cod lighthouse. Cape Light Compact announced a substantial decrease in electricity prices for its green aggregation power system supply program over the next 6-month term, beginning on customers' June 2018 meter dates and ending on December 2018 meter read dates. The Compact's new pricing for residential customers will be 10.6 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, 10.6 cents is similar to the going average rate in the United States at large, possibly a little bit low, but it's certainly very low for New England. This is the residential rate. And the reason they're able to get that residential rate is because Cape Light Compact is serving a large area, and it's contracting for all of that power from renewable power resources. And that's what it's delivering. They went to renewable power, as I recall, about 1.5 years ago, and this has been an extremely successful program. I think it's just about the entire county which would be Dukes County, as I recall, is and Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket. They're serving all of the, well, my recollection is that they're serving about 20 municipalities, and they're giving them a price that a lot of people in Vermont would certainly go for. Our next item coming up is from NCIA, and it is an opinion piece entitled "Suddenly, Solar Energy Plus Storage is Giving Conventional Fuels a Run for Their Money." And this should not be a great surprise to anybody who's been watching this show to this point, because just in this particular broadcast, we've been talking about how renewable energy prices have been going down, and the storage prices have been decreasing to the point where the combination is cheaper than fossil fuels. The fact is, what it looks like to me is that storage by itself makes cheaper energy if it's based on just fossil fuels. So it shouldn't be an issue, and solar power is starting to compete with wind power, which is already cheaper than combined cycle natural gas, which is the cheapest fossil fuels can do. And by the way, a good source for that, if you want a source, is the Lazard levelized cost of electricity. You can do a search on the internet for Lazard levelized cost of electricity. Lazard is Lazard, and look for version 11.0, which is the version that came out in November of 2017. And it basically tells you what the cost of wholesale electricity is compared to priced in a way that actually talks about the total cost, including subsidies and so forth. Does not include external costs, which would make fossil fuels extremely expensive. I should explain that. Wind power and solar power do not produce at the power plant do not produce emissions. Fossil fuels produce emissions, and those emissions include carbon dioxide, but they also include NOx, which is oxides of nitrogen. A certain amount of sulfur compounds are released. From coal, you get mercury. All of these things make their way into the environment, and there is damage done. As I mentioned earlier, the World Health Organization says about 7 million people are killed every year worldwide by air pollution. 7 million people, by the way, is comparable to the number of people who were in the armed forces who died in the Second World War, both sides. So fossil fuels are killing people at approximately the rate that the World War II was killing soldiers and sailors and airmen. In the United States, according to an MIT study that was done last year, about 200,000 people die every year as a result of air pollution. And that study was the most conservative study I have seen in the 7 years or so that I have been reviewing energy news. I've seen a lot of studies coming through, and a few of them were double that. But based on that study, we would say about 400 people die from exposure to, die prematurely from exposure to fossil fuel and other air pollution. I should point out that's mostly fossil fuels, but there is other air pollution involved. 400 people in Vermont. In Brattleboro, which is not all that big, with a population of 12,000, you would expect about 8 people per year. Almost every adult knows somebody who either has died or will die relatively soon as a result of this kind of problem. And of course, the cost of this is not, in terms of medical work that has to be done is not limited to those who die. It's everybody, and it's emphysema, it's asthma, it's lung cancer, it's chronic bronchitis, it's perhaps liver cancer and brain tumors I've seen associated with these things. These problems develop because we're using fossil fuels. When I was a child, we did not have an alternative. Today, we have an alternative, and the alternative is cheaper. It is not only cheaper, it's more comfortable. And so we really don't have an excuse to tie ourselves to the old ways of producing and using energy. But, you know, that's what we are doing. Anyway, I'm off on a rant here. Perhaps what I should do is go to my last item. The last item that we have is from quartz, which returns to something that we talked about just a couple of minutes ago. And that item, there we go. That item is a wind farm, the Aberdeen wind farm, which we have a picture of here. And I believe that ship that's in the wind farm is one of the service ships for the wind farm. The wind farm Donald Trump tried to block is now complete. Trump fought construction of the 11-turbine offshore wind farm at Aberdeen, but his legal challenges were overthrown in 2015. Now, the last of the turbines has been installed, completing the offshore project. The wind farm will provide approximately 70% of Aberdeen's electricity. Now, as I look at that picture, I wonder whether that really is the Aberdeen wind farm, because my recollection was that the Aberdeen wind farm's wind turbines were all lined up in a row, but I could be wrong about that. Anyway, Donald Trump didn't want to have people be able to see this wind farm from his golf course because he thought people would be scared away by it. And he traveled to Scotland and he gave testimony which was used in the parliamentary considerations, because the wind farm went before Parliament, or a parliamentary committee. And the committee, having reviewed Donald Trump's testimony, said that they had heard no credible testimony opposing the wind farm. So basically they were saying that Donald Trump, who was not yet president of the United States, was not providing credible information. The problem of wind farms, you know, I've said this before, and I think it's worth saying again. During the period since shortly after the Fukushima meltdown, that I've been looking at energy news every day. For the first year or so, I was putting out emails, and after that, I switched to my blog. Every day, I post 10 to 15 items. There are over 27,000 articles that have had links to them posted now. Those 27,000 articles, in order to find them, I had to open probably double that number of articles and read into them. In order to find the articles to read, I had to do searches and so forth, which meant that I had to look at headlines for possibly 25 or 30 articles for every single one I posted. That means that in the last 7 years, I've probably looked at well over 800,000 articles. I'm certain that I've looked at over 700,000. And there are certain things that I just look at. If they don't come from a totally unreliable source like Breitbart, or the Cato Institute, or the Heritage Foundation, which habitually seem to cite information that they want to cite that might be as much as 4 years old in a market that's changing radically very fast. I always open articles that talk about wind and health, wind and birds, wind and wildlife, wind and property values. But in terms of wind and health, I have yet to find one article that gave me scientific evidence of a connection between wind power and human health, that said that wind power was causing human health problems.